The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as Olivia Reynolds, a determined 17-year-old, stood at the center of it all. She faced Judge Patterson, a man known for his no-nonsense demeanor, and the smirk on his face told her everything she needed to know. He didn't take her seriously. "You think you can stand here and defend yourself against this court, against me?" Judge Patterson scoffed, his voice thick with condescension. "You're what, 17? Go home, Miss Reynolds." The crowd chuckled uneasily, a mix of amusement and discomfort filling the room. But Olivia didn't flinch. She straightened her spine, keeping her gaze locked on the judge. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but firm, "the Constitution doesn't say you need a law degree to defend yourself. It says everyone has the right to a fair trial, and I'm going to make sure I get one." The room fell silent. Even the judge seemed momentarily stunned. Before anyone could react, Olivia reached into her worn backpack, pulling out a thick stack of papers. She waved them in the air. "These," she declared, "are legal precedents, and I've studied every one of them. Let me show you exactly why you're wrong." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Judge Patterson's smirk faltered. He slammed his gavel down. "Enough," he barked, though a hint of panic slipped into his voice. Olivia didn't back down. She flipped to a highlighted section in one of the legal documents and began reading aloud, her words sharp and deliberate. The judge's face turned crimson as she outlined, in painstaking detail, how his previous rulings had ignored key judicial precedents. The bailiff leaned in to whisper something to the judge, but Olivia caught a single word muttered under his breath. "Impossible." A month earlier, Olivia had never imagined she would stand in a courtroom, let alone defend herself. She had been just another high school junior from Maplewood, a small town in the Midwest. She loved literature, hated calculus, and spent weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. Her life was as normal as it could be, until the day everything fell apart. It started with her father. It was a frosty morning in December, when Olivia's dad, Daniel Reynolds, was pulled over while driving her to school. The officer claimed their taillight was out, but what should have been a routine stop turned into something far more serious. Within minutes, Daniel was handcuffed and arrested. "Wait," Olivia cried, chasing after the officer. "There has to be a mistake." The officer didn't listen. Neither did the judge at her father's preliminary hearing. The charge? An unpaid parking fine from years ago. The penalty? A fine they couldn't afford. When Daniel couldn't pay, the judge sentenced him to 30 days in jail. The injustice burned inside Olivia. She had spent her whole life believing the system was fair. But now, staring at her father through the cold glass of a jail visitation room, she wasn't so sure. And then, just 2 weeks later, Olivia found herself in trouble. She was walking home from the library one evening when she heard shouting. Up ahead, 2 older boys from school were arguing. One shoved the other, and the boy stumbled, hitting his head on a mailbox. Before Olivia could react, someone shouted, "Hey, stop her!" She did it. To her horror, the boy who had fallen pointed at her. "She pushed me," he yelled. A few other students backed him up. Olivia had never seen them before in her life. The police were called. Despite her protests, Olivia was arrested on the spot. Her mother, overwhelmed and barely scraping by with her husband in jail, couldn't afford a lawyer. The public defender assigned to Olivia seemed exhausted, barely glancing at her file before suggesting she take a plea deal. But Olivia refused. She hadn't done anything wrong, and she wasn't about to let the system brand her as a criminal. So she made a decision. She would represent herself. The first few days were brutal. Olivia spent every free moment at the library, poring over thick law books and printing out endless pages of legal documents. Her classmates thought she was crazy. Even her mother begged her to reconsider. "You're just a kid, Olivia," her mother whispered one night, her voice trembling. "You can't take on a whole courtroom by yourself. You'll lose." Olivia shook her head. "If I don't fight," she said, "I've already lost." By the time her trial began, she had learned more about the law than she ever thought possible. She understood terms like burden of proof and due process. She knew her rights backward and forward, and most importantly, she had a plan. Still, nothing could have prepared her for the hostility she faced in court. From the moment she stood before Judge Patterson, he made it clear he didn't take her seriously. He interrupted her opening statement. He rolled his eyes when she cited case law. He even chuckled when she attempted to cross-examine a witness. But Olivia didn't let it break her. With every sneer and every mocking comment, she grew more determined. By the time she reached the final day of trial, the tension in the courtroom was unbearable. She had dismantled much of the prosecution's case, but the judge still seemed determined to rule against her. And then she discovered something. While reviewing documents late one night, she found a reference to a traffic camera near the scene of the incident. The footage hadn't been included in the evidence, because neither side had requested it. The next morning, Olivia stood before the court, her heart pounding. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "I have discovered the existence of a traffic camera that may have recorded the incident. I request that the footage be subpoenaed." Judge Patterson raised an eyebrow. "You're asking this court to delay proceedings for a fishing expedition?" "No, Your Honor," Olivia replied. "I'm asking this court to seek the truth. Isn't that what we're here for?" The judge's gaze bore into hers. For a moment, she thought he would deny her request. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed heavily. "Very well. The footage will be reviewed." When the video finally arrived, the courtroom leaned forward in anticipation. The grainy footage played on the screen. It showed exactly what Olivia had remembered. Two boys arguing, one shoving the other, and Olivia standing several feet away. A collective gasp filled the room. The boy who had accused her shifted uncomfortably. Even the prosecutor looked stunned. Judge Patterson stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Olivia, his voice quieter than before. "It seems you've made your point, Miss Reynolds." For the first time in weeks, Olivia allowed herself to breathe, but she wasn't done yet. She turned to the prosecutor. "Your Honor, I'd also like to request an investigation into witness tampering." The prosecutor paled. Judge Patterson's face darkened. "On what grounds?" Olivia lifted a paper from her file. "On the grounds that several of the witnesses against me have given conflicting statements, and one of them has already admitted in writing that he was pressured to lie." Silence. Then the judge exhaled sharply. "We will review the matter." And just like that, the trial shifted again. By the end of the week, the truth had unraveled. The prosecution's case had been built on fabricated testimony. The real culprit, one of the boys who had accused Olivia, was eventually caught in another altercation, proving his violent tendencies. And Olivia, she was acquitted. As she walked out of the courthouse that evening, her mother hugged her tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You proved them wrong." But Olivia didn't feel triumphant. She felt something deeper. She had seen firsthand how easily the system could be manipulated, how quickly justice could be denied, and she wasn't going to let it happen to anyone else. That day, she made a promise to herself. This was only the beginning. She was going to fight, And this time, she wouldn't be fighting just for herself. She would be fighting for justice. A new battle begins. Olivia Reynolds had done the impossible. She had won. The courtroom, once filled with skeptics and smirks, had been silenced by the truth. She had stood her ground against a system that had tried to crush her, and against all odds, she had proven her innocence. But victory didn't feel like the triumphant moment she had imagined. As she stepped out of the courthouse that day, surrounded by reporters and flashing cameras, she felt an unease she couldn't shake. The trial was over, but something told her that her fight was far from finished. She wasn't wrong. The first sign of trouble came just a few days later. Olivia had hoped life would return to normal after the trial. She tried to go back to school to pick up where she had left off before her world had turned after the trial. She tried to go back to school to pick up where she had left off before her world had turned upside down. But things weren't the same. Whispers followed her down the hallways. "That's the girl who defended herself in court." "Yeah, but I heard she just got lucky. The judge hated her. She probably did something. No one gets accused for no reason." The words stung, but Olivia had learned how to let them roll off her back, at least until she walked into her first period class and saw a message scrawled across her desk in black marker. "You think you're a hero? You're just a freak." Her heart clenched. She glanced around, but no one would meet her eyes. She swallowed hard, sat down, and tried to ignore it. But as the day went on, more messages appeared on her locker, on scraps of paper slipped into her backpack. "Stay in your lane, Reynolds. No one likes a know-it-all. You should have just taken the plea deal." By the end of the week, Olivia had no doubt someone wanted to make her regret standing up for herself, and they weren't going to stop. She had taken pictures of the messages, documenting each one. But what could she do? The school wouldn't take her seriously. The principal had already dismissed her concerns, telling her she should focus on moving forward and let things go. How could she let this go when it wasn't stopping? "Hey," a voice said. She looked up, startled. Standing across from her was Ethan Lawson, one of the quiet kids from her class. He was tall, with dark curly hair and an easygoing expression, but there was something serious in his eyes. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She hesitated but nodded. He dropped into the seat across from her and tapped her phone screen where one of the threatening messages was displayed. "I heard about what happened to you," he said, "and I saw that on your lock." "Let me guess," Olivia said bitterly. "You're here to tell me to let it go too?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I want to help." Olivia blinked. "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to be targeted," he said, his voice quieter now. "I saw what they did to you in court, and now they're trying to break you. If you back down, they win." Olivia studied him for a moment. "You know who's doing this?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before leaning in. "I think so. There's a group of guys, football players. They're mad because you embarrassed them. Turns out the guy who falsely accused you, his older brother's on the team." Olivia frowned. "So they're harassing me because I proved the truth?" Ethan gave a half smile. "People don't like being proven wrong, especially when it makes them look bad." Olivia exhaled slowly. "What do I do?" Ethan leaned back. "We prove it's them, and then we make sure they're held accountable." "To disarm, and then we make sure they're held accountable." The investigation. With Ethan's help, Olivia started gathering evidence. They took pictures of the messages, tracked when and where they appeared, and even recorded whispered conversations in the hallway when students thought no one was listening. The more they dug, the clearer the picture became. The leader of the harassment was Chase Nolan, the star quarterback, school golden boy, and older brother of the boy who had falsely accused Olivia in the trial. He had been furious when Olivia had exposed the truth, making his brother look like a liar in front of the entire town. And now, he wanted revenge. "He thinks no one can touch him," Ethan said one afternoon, as they sorted through screenshots and audio recordings. "His dad's on the school board. His uncle's a police officer. He's used to getting away with stuff." Olivia set her jaw. Not this time. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when they overheard Chase talking in the cafeteria. "She doesn't know when to quit," Chase was saying, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Someone needs to teach Reynolds a lesson." Ethan discreetly recorded the conversation on his phone. It was all they needed. Fighting back. Olivia had spent enough time learning the law to know what they were doing was harassment, and she wasn't going to sit back and let it continue. Armed with their evidence, she went straight to the principal's office. This time, she wasn't alone. Ethan, her mother, and even Mrs. Jenkins, the librarian who had helped her during her trial, stood by her side as she laid everything out. The messages, the threats, the recorded conversation. The principal, who had brushed off her concerns before, paled as he listened. "This is serious," he admitted. "We'll launch a formal investigation immediately." That afternoon, Chase and his friends were called to the office. Olivia didn't know what was said behind those closed doors, but by the next day, Chase was off the football team. Several of his friends were suspended, and just like that, the messages stopped. For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt like she could breathe again. Finochi withered. A new path. Later that evening, Olivia sat on her porch, watching the sunset. The fight had been exhausting, but she had won again. Ethan sat beside her, tossing a football in his hand. "You know," he said, "you're kind of scary when you put your mind to something." Olivia smirked. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Ethan grinned. "Absolutely." She let out a breath, glancing up at the sky. "This isn't over," she said. "There are other people out there dealing with this kind of thing. People who don't know how to fight back." Ethan tilted his head. "You thinking of making this a habit?" Olivia met his gaze. "Maybe." Ethan chuckled. "Well, if you ever need backup, let me know." Olivia smiled. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't done fighting for justice. Not by a long shot. And this time, she wouldn't be standing alone. The next battle for justice. Olivia Reynolds had won 2 battles, but she knew the war wasn't over. After proving her innocence in court and standing up to her bullies at school, she thought she could finally put everything behind her. But life had other plans. Now she was facing something much bigger than herself. Swiss. My brain. The call that changed everything. It started with a phone call. Olivia was sitting at the kitchen table, finally catching up on schoolwork, when her mom answered the phone. "Hello? Yes, this is Rebecca Reynolds." Wait. What?" Olivia looked up, watching as her mother's face drained of color. "When did this happen? Is he okay?" A pit formed in Olivia's stomach. Her mother listened for another moment, murmured a quick thank you, and hung up. She turned to Olivia, her expression tight. "That was Mrs. Jenkins," her mom said quietly. "She just found out that Greg Weston was released on bail." Olivia's heart stopped. Weston, the private investigator who had been working with the corrupt prosecutor in her case. The man who had been part of the system that tried to bury her. The man who had sent her threats and tried to intimidate her into giving up. "He's out?" Olivia whispered, gripping the edge of the table. Her mom nodded, her eyes filled with worry. And he's not happy about what happened in court. A shiver ran down Olivia's spine. She had already received anonymous threats after the trial, but she had thought those would stop once the corruption was exposed. Now, knowing Weston was free, it felt like a ticking time bomb had just been set in her life. Though in the minute others in his farm, or the young. Back to the fight. The next morning, Olivia met with James Carter, the investigator who had helped bring Weston down. "Olivia," James said, shaking his head, "I knew this might happen, but I was hoping we'd have more time." "Time for what?" Olivia asked, her arms crossed. James sighed. "Weston is dangerous. He has connections, and he's smart. He knows he can't openly threaten you, but that doesn't mean he won't try to make your life miserable." Olivia clenched her fists. "So what do we do?" James gave her a careful look. "We find out what he's planning before he can act." Olivia exhaled sharply. "And how do we do that?" James hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I have a contact who can help, but we have to be careful. Weston will know people are watching him, so he'll be playing it safe. If he's going to come after you, it won't be obvious." Olivia nodded. "Then let's get ahead of him. If he was going to come after you, it won't be obvious." This is Stowe, lurking nearby. For the next few days, Olivia tried to go about her life as usual, but something felt off. She started noticing little things. A black car parked across the street for hours at a time. A man in a baseball cap standing outside the coffee shop, watching her just a little too closely. Footsteps behind her when she walked home, always stopping when she turned around. She wasn't paranoid. She knew she was being followed. Then came the notes. The first one was taped to her locker. "You should have let it go." The second was slipped into her backpack at school. "Not every fight is worth it, Reynolds." The third was mailed to her house. "You exposed the wrong people. Walk away while you still can." Her mother was terrified. Olivia, on the other hand, was furious. She had spent too much time fighting for the truth to back down now. The Naridas, Naldavars, there was a dangerous lead. James worked quickly, using his contacts to track down Weston's movements. One afternoon, he called Olivia with an update. "I found something," he said. "Weston's been meeting with someone, an attorney named Victor Langston." "Who's he?" Olivia asked. "A fixer," James said grimly. "He cleans up problems for people with money and power. If he's involved, it means someone higher up is still trying to bury what happened in your trial." Olivia swallowed. "So, what do we do?" "We need proof," James said. "If Weston and Langston are working together to silence you, we have to catch them in the act." Olivia hesitated, then made a decision. "I want in." James sighed. "Olivia, no," she cut him off. "I'm already in this, James. They're coming after me whether I fight or not. I'd rather fight." James was silent for a moment before finally agreeing. "Okay, but we do this my way. No risks we can't control." The trap. The plan was simple. James arranged a fake meeting, using an informant to spread the word that Olivia was willing to negotiate. The goal was to see who would take the bait, and it worked. Weston showed up. Olivia, hiding with James across the street, watched as Weston met with Victor Langston outside a small run-down office building. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but James had a microphone set up nearby. "Reynolds is a loose end. Weston was saying. You said this would be taken care of. She's a kid, Langston replied coolly. She'll slip up eventually. Weston shook his head. She's not normal. She's already taken down Blake. And she's not afraid of me. We need a stronger message. Langston sighed. You do what you need to do. Just don't leave a trail. James looked at Olivia, eyes wide. They had just recorded something big. Weston wasn't just harassing her. He was planning something worse. And now they had proof. Weston, Olivia and James wasted no time. They took the recording to the authorities, ensuring the truth again. Olivia and James wasted no time. They took the recording to the authorities, ensuring that it would go public before Weston and Langston could cover their tracks. The press got hold of it, and within hours the story exploded. Weston was arrested. Langston faced an investigation. And Olivia, she had done it again. But this time, it wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about showing that no one, no matter how powerful, was above the law. 2. Aftermath. A week later, Olivia sat outside her house, staring up at the night sky. Ethan joined her, handing her a soda. So, you took down another corrupt guy. That's becoming a habit. Olivia smirked. Yeah, maybe I should start charging for it. Ethan chuckled. Seriously though, do you ever think about what's next? After all this, Olivia was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she admitted. I didn't expect any of this, but I do know one thing. What's that? Olivia looked at him, determination in her eyes. I'm not done fighting for justice. A battle not yet over. Olivia Reynolds thought the nightmare was finally over. She had fought for her innocence, exposed corruption, and even helped take down Greg Weston, the investigator who had tried to silence her. But she had learned something critical through this entire ordeal. Justice wasn't a one-time fight. It was a war. And the people in power didn't like losing. A week after Weston's arrest, Olivia's world was shaken once again. So, a chilling message. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of an envelope. It was a cloudy afternoon, and Olivia was sitting in the kitchen with her mum, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace. She had just started her homework when her mum walked in, holding a thick envelope with no return address. This came in the mail for you, her mom said, her voice uneasy. Olivia frowned. She rarely got mail. Reaching out, she carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. It was a lawsuit. She was being sued. So, Olivia demanded, her hands shaking as she held the papers. Her mother grabbed her phone and called James Carter, the investigator who had been helping them since the trial. We need to meet, she told him urgently. An hour later, James arrived at their house, flipping through the documents. His face darkened as he reached the last page. They're suing you for defamation, James said grimly. Weston's lawyer is arguing that your public statements and the exposure of his involvement in witness tampering ruined his career. Olivia's stomach turned. But it was true. We had evidence. We got him arrested. James nodded. That's not the point. This isn't about winning a case. It's about draining you financially, keeping you tied up in court so you don't have time to keep fighting. It's called a SLAPP lawsuit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. They don't care if they win. They just want to silence you. Olivia's mother looked horrified. But she's just a kid. She doesn't even have money. That's the point, James said. They want to exhaust you, wear you down and make you regret ever speaking out. Olivia clenched her fists. I won't let them. James exhaled. Then we fight back. Finding an ally, James made some calls, and within days, Olivia and her mother were sitting across from a new lawyer, Eleanor Hayes, a tough-as-nails attorney who specialized in protecting people from lawsuits like this. "You're in for a fight," Eleanor told Olivia, flipping through the lawsuit. "Weston's lawyers are funded by some powerful people, and they know how to play dirty." "I don't care," Olivia said. "I'm not backing down." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Good, because you've got the truth on your side. And we're going to make sure the court sees that." "Fine, we're going to make sure the court sees that." The courtroom. Again. A month later, Olivia found herself back in a courtroom. This time she wasn't the defendant in a criminal case. She was being sued by a man who had tried to destroy her life. Weston wasn't present, but his lawyer, a smug-looking man named Marcus Vale, stood confidently as he presented their argument. "Miss Reynolds made baseless claims that have permanently damaged my client's reputation and career," Vale said. "Her reckless behavior has cost him his job, his income, and his ability to support his family. We are seeking damages for the harm she has caused." Eleanor stood, her sharp gaze never wavering. "Your Honor, this case is a clear attempt to intimidate and silence my client. The accusations Miss Reynolds made were backed by actual evidence, which led to criminal charges against Mr. West. Furthermore, we believe this lawsuit violates anti-SLAPP laws, and we are filing a motion to dismiss." The judge leaned back in his chair. "We will review the motion. In the meantime, we will hear arguments from both sides." The case was set to continue. The pressure mounts over the next few weeks. Olivia felt the weight of the lawsuit bearing down on her. News outlets covered the story, some defending her, others painting her as a reckless teenager who had ruined an innocent man's life. Online she faced a storm of messages, some of them supportive, but many of them hateful. "You should have kept your mouth shut. This is what happens when you play hero. Weston's going to ruin you." She tried to ignore them, but it was exhausting. One night she broke down sitting on her bed with tears running down her face. Her mom sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her. "You don't have to go through this alone, Liv. I just don't understand why they won't let it go," Olivia whispered. "I was innocent. I did the right thing." Her mom sighed. "Because people in power don't like being challenged. And they especially don't like being beaten by a 16-year-old girl." Olivia wiped her tears. "Then I guess I'll have to beat them again." The turning point. James had been digging behind the scenes, trying to find a weakness in Weston's case. And finally he found something. Weakness in Weston's case. And finally he found something. Late one evening he called Olivia. "I think I've got what we need." She met him the next morning, and he handed her a file. "This is a record of Weston's payments. Turns out right before the lawsuit was filed, he received a large sum of money from an anonymous donor." Olivia's eyes widened. "Someone paid him to sue me?" James nodded. "And I think I know who." He flipped to another page. It showed a connection to Victor Langston, the same high-powered attorney who had been involved in covering up corruption in her first case. Olivia felt a rush of anger. "They're trying to bury me." James nodded. "But now we have proof that Weston's lawsuit isn't legitimate. It's a coordinated attack." File. Weston was financially incentivized to file this lawsuit. This was not about seeking justice, it was about retaliation. The judge reviewed the documents. His face darkened. "Mr. Vale, do you have a response?" Marcus Vale looked rattled. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." The fact remains that my client has suffered damages. The judge cut him off. Mr. Vale, this court takes fraudulent lawsuits very seriously. If it is proven that this lawsuit was filed in bad faith, your client and potentially you will face consequences. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Olivia clenched her fists, barely containing her relief. The judge turned to Eleanor. Your motion to dismiss is granted. This case is over. Olivia barely heard the judge's next words. The only thing that mattered was that it was done. Filed. A victory, but not the end. That night Olivia sat outside, staring up at the sky. Her mom brought her a cup of hot chocolate and sat beside her. You did it, her mom said softly. Olivia nodded. For now. Her mom gave her a knowing look. You're not done fighting, are you? Olivia smirked. Not even close. She had seen too much to walk away now. She had fought for herself. Now maybe it was time to start fighting for others. The next battle begins. Olivia Reynolds had won. Again. She had fought off the corrupt forces trying to silence her. She had exposed Greg Weston's fraudulent lawsuit and walked out of court victorious. The threats against her had been dismantled and justice had prevailed. But Olivia knew better than to assume the battle was over. She wasn't just a girl who had defended herself in court anymore. She was a symbol, a young woman who had exposed corruption, forced accountability, and refused to back down. And powerful people hated that. Her next battle, Redimius. An unexpected visit. It had been a month since the lawsuit had been dismissed. Olivia was trying to return to normal life, if that was even possible anymore. She was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing some schoolwork when there was a knock at the door. Her mother looked up from the sink, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Expecting someone? Olivia shook her head. No. Her mom peered through the peephole, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. She opened the door, revealing a woman in a dark navy blazer, her sharp features giving her a professional but no-nonsense demeanor. Mrs. Reynolds, the woman said, nodding politely. I'm Agent Vanessa Carter with the Department of Justice. Olivia's pulse spiked. May I speak with your daughter? Government takes notice. Olivia and her mom sat across from Agent Carter in their small living room, tension heavy in the air. I know you've been through a lot, Carter began, looking directly at Olivia. And I want to assure you, I'm not here to cause more problems. Olivia folded her arms. Then why are you here? Carter pulled out a file, setting it on the coffee table. Because the corruption you exposed doesn't stop at Greg Weston, she said. It runs deeper than you realize. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected as much. She knew Weston wasn't working alone. But to hear a federal agent confirm it, this isn't just about a rogue investigator and a crooked prosecutor. Carter continued. There's an entire network of individuals who have been manipulating cases, hiding evidence, intimidating witnesses, and ensuring wrongful convictions. Olivia felt her fists clench. How long have you known? We've been gathering evidence for years, Carter admitted. But what you did, winning your case, exposing Weston, forcing the lawsuit to collapse, you accelerated everything. You proved that there's a crack in their system. Olivia exhaled. And now they're scared. Carter nodded. And that's why I need your help. A dangerous proposal. 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 A limgerous proposal. A limgerous bow. Autuamani risting your head. Absolutely not, Mom said. She's a high school student. She's not getting involved in some government investigation. Carter remained calm. I understand your concerns, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't think she was capable. Olivia took a deep breath, curiosity warring with caution. What exactly are you asking me to do? Carter leaned forward. We believe Weston and his associates were covering up wrongful convictions. People who were imprisoned not because they were guilty, but because someone needed them to be. She slid a photograph across the table. A young man, no older than his mid-20s, stared back at Olivia from behind a prison jumpsuit. This is Daniel Hayes. He was convicted of robbery and assault 5 years ago. Carter's voice darkened. But the evidence suggests he was framed. Olivia's chest tightened. You have a unique perspective, Carter continued. You know how they operate. You know how they manipulate trials. We need your insight to help break this case open. Olivia hesitated. And what happens if I say no? Carter sighed. Then we keep fighting without you. But if you help us, we might be able to save innocent lives. Olivia sat back, exhaling shakily. She had fought so hard to clear her own name. Could she really walk away now, knowing others were suffering the same injustice? First clue, despite her mother's protests, Olivia agreed to help. The next day, she met with Carter and a small team of investigators in a downtown office building. We need to prove Daniel Hayes was framed, Carter explained. That means finding holes in the case against him. Olivia scanned the case file, flipping through police reports, witness statements, and forensic evidence. Then something caught her eye. This witness, Olivia murmured, pointing to a statement in the file. They claimed to have seen Daniel running from the scene, but their statement was filed weeks later, after Daniel had already been arrested. Carter leaned over. Good catch. That's not just suspicious, Olivia said. That's staged. Carter smiled, which means we have our first lead. That's staged. Carter smiled. You don't know what you're getting into. And then, one night, she got a text that sent a chill down her spine. A picture of her mother, leaving work. Carter's, the breaking point. Olivia's blood ran cold as she stared at the message. Someone was watching them. She rushed into the living room, where her mom was watching TV. Mom, we have to go. Now. Her mom's eyes widened. What's wrong? I think we're in danger. They grabbed their things and rushed out, driving straight to Carter's office. We have a problem, Olivia told her. As soon as they arrived, Carter's face hardened when she saw the message. This is exactly why I didn't want her involved, Olivia's mom said, her voice shaking with anger. Carter exhaled. I understand, but we can protect you. Olivia's mind was racing. If someone was threatening her now, it meant she was getting too close, which meant she couldn't stop. Carter's, a woman named Rebecca Lawson, a former employee at the DA's office. Olivia and Carter met her in a secure location, and as soon as they sat down, Rebecca broke down in tears. I've been keeping this secret for years, she sobbed. I thought if I stayed quiet they would leave me alone. Carter leaned forward. Tell us everything. Rebecca wiped her eyes. Daniel Hayes. He was innocent. The real robber was the son of a judge. They needed someone to take the fall, so they pinned it on Daniel. Olivia's heart pounded. Carter's expression turned deadly serious. Do you have proof? Rebecca nodded. Yes, and I'm ready to testify. Carter's expression turned deadly serious. Her journey wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. She had once fought for her own freedom. Now she was fighting for justice itself. And she wouldn't stop until the truth was undeniable. The deeper the truth, the darker the threat. Olivia Reynolds had uncovered too much. She thought her fight was over when she won her trial. She thought exposing Greg Weston's corruption had been the final battle. But she was wrong. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Daniel Hayes, an innocent man trapped in prison because powerful people needed someone to take the fall. She was fighting against a system that thrived on deception, a system that saw justice as negotiable if you had the right connections. And now she had proof. Rebecca Lawson, a former employee at the DA's office, had come forward. She had told them everything. The real criminal was the son of a judge, and Daniel had been convicted to protect powerful interests. Rebecca had evidence, but Olivia also knew one thing for sure. If the people behind this cover-up had been willing to frame an innocent man, they would do anything to keep the truth buried. And she was next on their list. Jayaf, a dangerous proposition. The next morning, Olivia and Agent Vanessa Carter met with Rebecca in a secure location, a motel off the highway, far from prying eyes. Rebecca sat nervously on the edge of the bed, wringing her hand. I don't know if I can do this. Carter remained calm. You already have. You came forward. That's the hardest part. Rebecca exhaled shakily. You don't understand. These people, they don't play fair. They have power, money, connection. If I testify, I'll be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Olivia, who had seen firsthand what these people were capable of, nodded. That's why we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more time they have to cover their tracks. Carter leaned forward. If we get this to a judge before they can silence you, we can start the process of overturning Daniel's conviction. Rebecca hesitated. What if the judge is one of them? That question lingered in the air, because it was a real possibility. The corruption ran deep, and if they took this evidence to the wrong person, it could disappear forever. We don't take it to just any judge, Carter said finally. We take it to a federal court. Rebecca blinked. A federal case. Carter nodded. That's the only way to keep it out of their hands. Rebecca swallowed hard. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Wallow, attorney's office. Rebecca would stay hidden until she was called to testify. But Olivia had a bad feeling. Something's not right, she told Carter as they got into the car. Carter glanced at her. What do you mean? Rebecca is scared, really scared. What if she runs? Carter exhaled. She won't. But Olivia wasn't so sure. Because fear made people desperate. And desperate people made bad choices. Thunder desperatins. That night, Olivia's phone buzzed at 2. She groggily reached for it, expecting another threatening text. But it wasn't a threat. It was Carter. Rebecca's gone. Olivia shot upright in bed. What? She disappeared from the motel. No sign of forced entry. No note. Olivia felt her stomach drop. She didn't run, she whispered. They got to her. The hunt begins. By morning, the motel was swarming with federal agents. Carter paced near the parking lot, barking orders into her phone. Check the security footage. Look for any vehicles that came or left between midnight and 3 a.m. Olivia stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly. She didn't just vanish, she said. Whoever took her didn't want her talking. Carter hung up the phone and sighed. If we don't find her fast, we could lose her for good. Olivia's mind raced. What if we're looking at this the wrong way? Carter frowned. What do you mean? They know we'd assume Rebecca was taken against her will, Olivia explained. But what if they threatened her? What if she left voluntarily to protect someone she loves? Carter's eyes widened. Like a family member? Olivia nodded. They both thought the same thing at the same time. Her sister. Thorster. A desperate plea. Rebecca had one living relative, her younger sister Emily Lawson. They found Emily's address within an hour and rushed to her apartment. Carter knocked hard on the door. FBI, open up. No answer. Olivia glanced at the window. The lights are on. Carter knocked again, this time louder. Emily Lawson, we know you're in there. A shuffling sound came from inside. Then slowly, the door creaked open. Emily stood there, her face pale and tear-streaked. Carter didn't waste time. Where's Rebecca? Emily's lower lip trembled. She said she had to leave. Did she say why? Olivia pressed. Emily hesitated, then whispered, They threatened me. Olivia's breath caught. Carter's expression hardened. Who? Emily shook her head. I don't know. I got a call last night from a blocked number. A man said that if Rebecca testified, I'd be the one to disappear next. Olivia's blood boiled. They forced her to run. Emily nodded, tears spilling over. She called me before she left. She was crying. She said she didn't have a choice. Carter exhaled, rubbing her temple. We need to find her before they do something worse. Olivia took a deep breath, her mind racing. If she left willingly, she had a plan, she said. She wouldn't just go anywhere. Carter nodded. Then let's figure out where. Steinmed. The hidden message. Emily pulled out her phone. Rebecca sent me a text before she left. She handed it to Olivia. It read, Don't try to find me, stay safe, and tell them the answer is where the truth always hides. Olivia frowned. Where the truth always hides. Carter's eyes widened. She's talking about the case files. Olivia gasped. The DA's office. No. Carter's voice was firm. The old records room. The one they shut down years ago after switching to digital storage. Olivia's heart pounded. If Rebecca left a message for us, that's where it will be. Carter grabbed her car keys. Then let's go. Steinmed. Thus go. Steinmed. The next step. As they sped toward the abandoned records facility, Olivia's mind raced. She had thought she was done fighting, but this battle was just beginning. They had come too far to turn back now. If Rebecca was still alive, they had to find her. Because if they didn't, the truth might disappear forever. The point of no return. Olivia Reynolds sat in the passenger seat of Agent Carter's car, gripping her phone tightly. The last message from Rebecca Lawson still lingered on the screen. Don't try to find me. Stay safe. And tell them the answer is where the truth always hides. She read it over and over, dissecting every word. The truth always hides. Olivia knew that meant evidence. Something Rebecca had left behind, something crucial. Agent Carter kept her eyes on the road, her grip firm on the steering wheel. We're walking into dangerous territory, Olivia, she said. If Rebecca really left something behind, it means the people who are after her know about it too. We need to be careful. Olivia nodded. We don't have a choice. If we don't act fast, They'll get to it first. They sped toward the abandoned records facility, an old building on the outskirts of town. It had once housed decades of legal documents before the system was digitized. If Rebecca had hidden something there, it was because she knew no one would think to look in a place the city had forgotten. But Olivia had a sinking feeling they weren't the only ones who had figured that out. The city had forgotten. Carter parked a block away, and they moved in on foot. Carter pulled out her gun as they reached the entrance. "Stay behind me." Olivia barely had time to nod before Carter used bolt cutters to snap the chain. The door creaked as they stepped inside, dust swirling in the dim light. Rows of old filing cabinets stretched into the darkness. The air smelled of mildew and forgotten secrets. Olivia swallowed hard. Where do we even start? Carter scanned the room. Rebecca wouldn't have just stashed it anywhere. If she was hiding something important, she would have needed a place where she knew it wouldn't be accidentally discovered. Olivia's mind raced. Where the truth always hides. And then it hit her. The case files, she said, turning to Carter. The storage section where they kept sealed records. The ones no one is allowed to touch. Carter's eyebrows lifted. That would make sense. Where is it? Olivia pointed toward a heavy metal door on the far side of the room. There. If she was hiding something important, she would have needed a place where she knew it wouldn't be accidentally gunned. The door was locked, but Carter found an old crowbar leaning against a nearby shelf. With a grunt, she forced it open, the metal shrieking in protest. Inside, rows of sealed case files lined the walls, many of them covered in dust. Olivia moved quickly, scanning the labels. Rebecca wouldn't have hidden something without leaving a clue. And then she saw it. A folder, newer than the others, sitting at the end of the row. No dust. No wear. Olivia grabbed it and flipped it open. Her breath caught. Inside were photocopies of official case documents, including an original police report from the case that had put Daniel Hayes in prison. The details had been altered in the official record, but this copy showed the truth. The real suspect had been the son of a judge. The arresting officer had been pressured to change his statement. The evidence had been manipulated before the trial. And then there was something even worse. A list of names. Prosecutors, judges, high-ranking officials, people who had been paid off to make sure Daniel Hayes stayed in prison. Carter leaned over her shoulder, her face hardening. "This is what we needed," she said. "If we can get this into the right hands." A noise from the entrance cut her off. A footstep. Someone else was here. Calder's ding your appendicitis rituent. Carter shoved the folder into Olivia's hands. "Stay behind me." They crept back toward the entrance, their footsteps barely making a sound. "Stay behind me." They crept back toward the entrance, their footsteps barely making a sound. Through the gap in the doorway, Olivia saw two men step inside, dressed in dark clothing, guns holstered at their sides. They weren't cops. They were fixers, hired men sent to clean up problems. Olivia's heart pounded. One of the men spoke into a radio. "They've been here. Search the place." Carter pressed a hand against Olivia's shoulder, signaling her to stay low. She reached for her gun, but Olivia grabbed her arm. "No," she whispered. "They're looking for this." She held up the folder. "If we can get out without a fight, we have a chance." Carter's jaw clenched, but she nodded. "We need a distraction." Olivia glanced around. The room was filled with old case files, stacks of paper, and an overhead sprinkler system. She grabbed a rusty metal rod and hurled it at one of the ceiling pipes. It hit with a loud clang, and a second later, Water began spraying down from the burst pipe. The two men turned sharply toward the noise. Carter grabbed Olivia's hand. "Go. Now." They bolted toward a side exit, slipping through the door just as the men rushed toward the disturbance. The second they were outside, Carter shoved Olivia behind a dumpster and pulled out her phone. "We need backup at the old records facility," she said. "Now." Then she turned to Olivia. "Are you okay?" Olivia nodded, clutching the folder. "We need to get this to someone who can actually do something with it." Carter took a deep breath. "There's only one person I trust with this." Floor. Carter pulled into an underground parking lot and turned off the engine. She looked at Olivia. "Listen to me carefully. If anything happens, you run. Got it?" Olivia's stomach twisted. "You think they'll try to stop us?" Carter hesitated, then nodded. "They're desperate. If they realize what we have, they'll do whatever it takes." They entered the building through a back entrance, taking the service elevator to the 5th floor. Olivia followed Carter down a dimly lit hallway, stopping in front of a heavy wooden door. Carter knocked twice. The door opened, revealing a tall man in a suit, his expression unreadable. Carter handed him the folder. "Assistant U.S. Attorney Miles Harper. Meet Olivia Reynolds. She's the reason we have this." Harper opened the folder, his eyes scanning the contents. Then he looked at Olivia. "You just became a very dangerous person to a lot of powerful people," he said. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Olivia took a deep breath. She had been threatened, followed, intimidated, and she was still standing. She looked him in the eye. "I was born ready." The turning point. Olivia Reynolds sat in a dimly lit conference room, across from Assistant U.S. Attorney Miles Harper. The weight of the folder she had retrieved from the abandoned records facility seemed to press down on her like a physical burden. It was proof, concrete, undeniable proof, that powerful figures had conspired to send an innocent man to prison. But it was also something more. It was a target on her back. Miles Harper flipped through the documents, his sharp eyes scanning the names, the falsified reports, the suppressed evidence. Every now and then he muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. "This," he finally said, exhaling slowly, "is exactly what we need." Olivia felt her chest tighten. "But will it be enough?" Harper nodded grimly. "If we handle this the right way, yes. But we need to act fast. The people behind this aren't going to sit back and watch their empire crumble." He closed the folder and leaned forward. "I need you to understand something, Olivia. Exposing corruption at this level is like kicking a hornet's nest. They'll fight back." Olivia swallowed hard. "I know." Carter, standing near the door with her arms crossed, chimed in. "And they already have. Whoever sent those fixers to the records facility is going to realize we got away. They're going to escalate." Harper tapped his fingers on the folder. "Considering, we have two options. We can go public immediately, hold a press conference, and let the world see this." "Too risky," Carter interrupted. "We don't know how deep this goes. If we show our cards too soon, they'll find a way to bury it before we can get a single conviction." Harper nodded. "Then we build the case from the inside. We use this evidence to secure warrants, flip key players, and dismantle the corruption one piece at a time." Olivia clenched her fists. "But that takes time. And in the meantime, they'll come after me." Harper's expression darkened. "Yes." A heavy silence filled the room. And then Olivia made her decision. "Then let's get to work." Or the first crack. Harper wasted no time. Within hours he had assembled a small team of trusted federal agents, people he knew wouldn't fold under pressure. Together they began analyzing the documents, cross-referencing them with existing records, identifying weak links in the conspiracy, and they found one: Judge Alan Whitmore. His name appeared in multiple places, each time tied to questionable rulings that had benefited the very people Olivia and Carter were now fighting against. More importantly, they found something else: financial records. Large, unexplained deposits into an offshore account. Olivia leaned over Harper's shoulder as he highlighted the transactions. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked. Harper nodded. "It's a start. If we can bring Whitmore in, get him to cooperate, we can blow this wide open." Carter straightened. "Then let's bring him in." Or an unwanted guest. The next morning, Olivia woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it groggily, but the moment she saw the unknown number, she was fully awake. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A pause, then a deep, measured voice. "You should have walked away, Olivia." Her breath caught. She sat up, gripping the phone tightly. "Who is this?" A low chuckle. "You don't need to know my name. Just know that you're in over your head. Drop this case, and you might still have a future." Olivia's pulse pounded. "And if I don't?" Silence. "Then you won't be around long enough to regret it." The call ended. Her hands were shaking. She immediately dialed Carter. Or the setup. By midday, Olivia sat in Harper's office, recounting the call as Carter listened, her expression unreadable. Harper, however, was furious. "They're getting desperate," he muttered. "They wouldn't be making direct threats if they thought they had control." Olivia wasn't comforted by that. What if they're serious? What if they actually cut her off? Then we make sure they don't get the chance. She turned to Harper. "Can you trace the call?" Harper sighed. "It was likely bounced through multiple networks. We can try, but it'll take time." Olivia exhaled sharply. "We don't have time." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Then let's speed things up." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Get a team on Whitmore." Confronting a judge. By nightfall, Carter and Olivia sat in an unmarked black SUV, watching as Judge Alan Whitmore left his private law club. He was alone, which was good. If they had to approach him in public, they needed him vulnerable. Harper's agents had already set the trap. The moment Whitmore reached his car, a black sedan blocked his exit. Carter was out of the SUV in an instant, moving toward the judge with Olivia close behind. Whitmore scowled. "What is this? Who are you people?" Carter flashed her badge. "We need to talk, Judge." "I don't have time for this," he snapped, reaching for his phone. Olivia stepped forward. "Then make time." He froze. His gaze shifted to Olivia. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You," he murmured. "You're the girl from that trial." Olivia met his stare head-on. "The girl who just found out exactly how much of a fraud you are." Whitmore's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." Carter smirked. "Oh, we do." She held up a printed copy of his bank statement. "Would you like to explain why millions of dollars have been deposited into your account from shell companies tied to known criminals?" Whitmore went pale. "We can do this two ways," Harper said, stepping up beside Carter. "You can cooperate. Tell us everything, and maybe we cut you a deal. Or," he tilted his head, "we go public. And trust me, Judge, when the press gets a hold of this, you won't have a career left to protect." Whitmore's eyes darted around. He was cornered. He licked his lips. "If I talk, they'll kill me." Carter's tone was ice cold. "If you don't talk, we'll bury you alive with charges." Silence. Then, "I need protection." Harper nodded. "Done." Whitmore let out a shaky breath. Fine. He looked at Olivia. They'll come for you first. You looked at Olivia. They'll come for you first. The corruption didn't just extend to the legal system. It reached law enforcement, politics, even corporate deals. We can take them down, Harper said, exhilarated. This is enough to bring all of them to justice. Olivia should have felt victorious, but instead all she could hear was Whitmore's warning. They'll come for you first. That night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed again. Another message. You don't know what you've started, but you'll wish you never did. Olivia clenched her fists. They could threaten her. They could follow her, but they would never silence her. Final reckoning. The weight of everything Olivia Reynolds had uncovered sat heavy in her chest. The conspiracy was deeper than she had ever imagined. Corrupt judges, law enforcement officials, even corporate leaders, all working together to manipulate the system for their own gain. And now they knew she knew. The threatening text messages had been relentless. You don't know what you've started. Walk away while you still can. You will regret this. But Olivia refused to back down. She sat in Assistant U.S. Attorney Miles Harper's office, flipping through the thick folder of evidence they had gathered with Judge Alan Whitmore's cooperation. Whitmore had given them everything: wire transfers, recorded conversations, internal memos implicating the major players in this tangled web of corruption. Carter, standing by the window, arms crossed, exhaled sharply. This is enough to bring them down, she muttered. But they're not going to let that happen. Harper nodded grimly. They've already tried intimidation. That didn't work. The next step is elimination. Olivia's stomach tightened. Then we don't give them time to act. Harper leaned forward. What are you suggesting? Olivia met his gaze. We expose them, all of them, before they can shut us down. A beat of silence. Then Carter smiled. I like the way you think. Theory. Formation. Truth. Harper wasted no time. Within hours he arranged for sealed indictments to be filed against multiple key players, judges, prosecutors, law enforcement officers, and corporate executives. But Olivia knew filing charges wasn't enough. They needed to make sure everyone knew the truth before anyone had a chance to cover it up. That's where the press came in. Olivia, Carter, and Harper worked late into the night, gathering every document, every testimony, every piece of evidence they could. And then they reached out to investigative journalist Brooke Langston, one of the few reporters Olivia trusted. The next morning, Olivia sat across from Brooke at a small cafe, her heart pounding. She slid a flash drive across the table. This has everything, she said. Names, transactions, cover-ups. The entire system is rotten. Brooke picked up the flash drive, studying Olivia. You understand what this means, don't you? If I run this story, it's going to be war. Olivia exhaled. Then let's give them a war. Thaw. The retaliation. The next day, the headline broke. Exclusive, massive, legal conspiracy uncovered. Judge, prosecutors, and officers implicated in corruption scandal. Within hours, the story was everywhere. News outlets ran with it. Social media exploded, and the public outcry was immediate. People demanded resignations, investigations, justice. And just like that, Olivia's enemies had nowhere to hide. But they weren't going down without a fight. That night, Olivia was walking to her car when she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. engine running, headlights off. Her pulse quickened. She pretended not to notice, fumbling with her keys, but her instinct screamed, "Get out of here." Just as she reached for the driver's side door, tires screeched. The SUV peeled out, racing toward her. Olivia barely had time to react before someone yanked her back, a strong arm pulling her away just as the SUV flew past, missing her by inches. She hit the ground hard, gasping. "Jesus, Olivia," a voice said. "Are you okay?" She looked up. "Carter." Shaking, Olivia nodded. "They just tried to kill me." Carter's jaw clenched. "And they failed." She pulled Olivia to her feet. "Come on. It's time we finish this." The takedown. Harper's office was buzzing. The DOJ had officially launched a criminal investigation into the conspiracy. And Harper's office was buzzing. The DOJ had officially launched a criminal investigation into the conspiracy. And Harper's team was already making arrests. Judge Alan Whitmore had been placed in protective custody. Corrupt officers were being stripped of their badges. And the most powerful figures, the ones who had been untouchable for years, were finally being held accountable. But there was one name missing from the list: Victor Langley, the man pulling the string. Langley was the CEO of Langley & Cole, a multi-billion-dollar firm that had been funding the corruption from behind the scenes. He had deep connections in politics, business and law enforcement. If anyone had the resources to fight back, it was him. And he had just disappeared. "We need to find him before he makes his next move," Harper said, pacing. Carter was already checking her phone. "I might have something. One of my sources said Langley owns a private estate upstate. If he's hiding, that's where he'll be." Olivia's heart pounded. "Then let's go get him." Serious. Hawthorne. The final confrontation. The estate was a fortress, tall gates, security cameras, and armed guards patrolling the grounds. But Olivia, Carter, and Harper had come prepared. Dressed in tactical gear, they moved in under cover of darkness, Harper's team flanking them from all sides. Inside the estate, Langley sat in his lavish office, sipping whiskey. He barely looked surprised when Carter kicked open the door. "Ah," he said, smiling. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Harper stepped forward. "Victor Langley, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of fraud." Langley smirked. "You think you've won?" Olivia clenched her fists. "You have no power anymore. The world knows what you did." Langley took another sip of whiskey. "You're naive," he said. "Take me in if you want. But this system? It was built by men like me. It'll protect me." Carter smiled. "Not this time." At that moment, Harper's team swarmed the estate, seizing computers, files, everything they needed to bury Langley for good. And then, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Langley's smirk finally faded. It was over. Over the next few weeks, Olivia watched as justice was finally served. Langley was charged with dozens of felonies. Mr. Blake, the corrupt prosecutor, was disbarred and arrested. Judge Whitmore's testimony helped secure convictions against multiple corrupt officials, and the legal system, the very institution that had nearly destroyed Olivia, began to rebuild itself. But Olivia knew the fight wasn't over. She stood outside the courthouse, taking a deep breath. Carter walked up beside her. "So what's next?" Olivia smiled. "I think I'm going to law school." Carter smirked. "Figures." Harper joined them, hands in his pockets. "You know, Olivia, I could use someone like you in my office." Ever thought about becoming a prosecutor? Olivia chuckled. Let me graduate first. Harper grinned. I'll be waiting. As the sun set over the city, Olivia looked at the courthouse one last time. She had been falsely accused, threatened, hunted, but she had never given up, and now she was ready to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced by corruption. Because if this case had taught her anything, it was this: the truth always wins. The final verdict. The courtroom was packed, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Olivia Reynolds sat at the defense table, her hands clasped together, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment everything had been leading up to. Across the room, Victor Langley, the powerful CEO behind the entire corruption scandal, sat with his attorneys. His expression was unreadable, but Olivia could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. He wasn't invincible anymore. Judge Alan Whitmore, who had turned witness against the corrupt system, sat with Assistant U.S. Attorney Miles Harper, waiting for the final decision. The jury had been deliberating for 11 hours, and now, as they filed back into the courtroom, everyone held their breath. The court will now hear the jury's verdict, the judge announced. The foreperson, a woman in her 60s, stood and unfolded a small piece of paper. Her voice was steady as she read. On the charges of conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice and witness tampering, we, the jury, find the defendant, Victor Langley, guilty. A wave of emotions surged through Olivia: relief, triumph, exhaustion. The gasps, murmurs, and then cheers from the gallery filled the air. But Judge Whitmore's gavel silenced them. This court finds the defendant guilty on all charges, he declared. Sentencing will be scheduled at a later date. Langley's face paled, and for the first time he looked afraid. His lawyers whispered frantically to him, but he wasn't listening. He had lost. As the judge dismissed the jury, Olivia turned to Carter, who sat beside her, gripping her hand. You did it, Carter whispered. Olivia swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. We did it. Thus, as good, justice, and consequences. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaotic. Reporters, cameras, protesters, supporters, all wanting a piece of the biggest legal scandal in decades. Harper was already surrounded by journalists, fielding questions about the case. But Olivia wasn't ready to speak yet. She was still trying to process everything. Langley was gone. The prosecutors who had framed innocent people were behind bars. The corrupt judges had been removed from the bench. Justice had been served. But Olivia knew this wasn't the end. She turned to Carter. How many more cases do you think were affected? Carter sighed. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. That means people are still sitting in jail for crimes they didn't commit. Carter nodded, her expression serious. We'll get them out, one by one. Olivia took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility settling over her. She wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Say, a new beginning. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to return to some kind of normal. Olivia had been offered multiple law school scholarships, her story becoming an inspiration for young aspiring attorneys across the country. But instead of celebrating, she was back in court. This time, fighting for the people still trapped in the corrupt system. One of them was Luis Martinez, a man wrongfully convicted years earlier, due to the very corruption Olivia had helped expose. His case was one of many that Harper and his team were reviewing. Olivia stood before Judge Whitmore, presenting Luis's case. She wasn't a lawyer yet, but with Harper's approval she was allowed to act as an advocate. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "This man was convicted based on falsified evidence. The prosecution withheld key documents that would have exonerated him. We have proof." Judge Whitmore studied the file in front of him. He had been on the wrong side of justice before, but now he had vowed to make things right. He looked at Luis and nodded. "Mr. Martinez, you are hereby exonerated. You are free to go." The courtroom erupted into applause. Luis's wife sobbed, hugging him as the reality sank in. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the immense relief and satisfaction of what they had accomplished. It wasn't just about winning. It was about changing lives. A letter and a decision. That night, Olivia sat in her tiny apartment, going through the pile of letters that had flooded in after the trial. People thanking her, people asking for help, people who had lost hope. One letter, in particular, caught her eye. It was from a young girl, no older than 50. "Dear Olivia, I watched your trial on TV. I always thought the system was against people like us, but you showed me that one person can make a difference. I want to be like you one day. Thank you for fighting for the truth." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. She thought back to the terrifying days of her own trial, when she had been alone, unsure, drowning in fear. Now she was the one inspiring others. Carter's voice echoed in her head. "Ever thought about becoming a prosecutor?" Olivia had fought against corrupt prosecutors, but now maybe she could be the one to fix the system from the inside. She picked up the phone and dialed Harper. "Harper," she said. He chuckled. "You've got that tone in your voice. What's on your mind?" "I want to go to law school," she said. "And when I'm done, I want a job in your office." There was a beat of silence. Then Harper's voice, warm with approval. "I'll be waiting." Epilogue. The fighter. Years later, Olivia Reynolds stood in the same courtroom where she had once fought for her own freedom. Only this time she wasn't the defendant. She was standing at the prosecutor's table, wearing a crisp suit, holding the power to fight for real justice. She had dedicated her career to freeing the innocent and holding the guilty accountable. And as she looked across the room at a young defendant, scared, alone, trapped by a system designed to crush them, she knew what she had to do, because she had been that person once, and she would never let anyone go through it alone again. The power of truth and resilience. The story of Olivia Reynolds is more than just a courtroom drama. It is a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and standing up for what is right, even when the odds seem impossible. Olivia's journey reminds us that justice is not always handed to us. Sometimes we must fight for it, and that fight may not be easy. In a world where power often seems to belong to those with wealth and influence, her story proves that one determined voice can shake even the most corrupt systems. For those of us who have lived through decades of change, witnessing history unfold, facing personal trials, and learning hard-earned lessons, we understand the importance of integrity, courage, and perseverance. Olivia's story resonates deeply because it reflects a universal truth. Doing the right thing is rarely the easiest path, but it is always the most important one. Many of us have experienced moments where we felt unheard, where the system seemed stacked against us, or where fear of speaking out held us back. Olivia's journey reminds us that silence in the face of injustice only allows corruption to grow. Whether in a courtroom, a workplace, a community, or even within our own families, we all face situations where standing up for what is right requires strength and conviction. The lesson here is clear. Never underestimate the impact of your voice. Her story also teaches us about the importance of mentorship and support. Olivia did not win her battle alone. She had allies, mentors, and people who believed in her. Just as she was guided by those who saw her potential, we too have the power to guide, inspire, and support those who need encouragement, whether it's helping a young person find their way, standing by a friend in need, or simply offering words of wisdom. Our experiences hold immense value. Another powerful message in Olivia's journey is that justice is not just about winning in court, it's about changing lives. After her victory, she didn't walk away. She continued the fight for those still trapped in an unjust system. This speaks to the idea that our struggles, our victories, and even our losses can serve a greater purpose. What we endure today may pave the way for someone else's freedom tomorrow. For those of us reflecting on life's journey, Olivia's story is a reminder that it is never too late to stand for truth. Whether we are young or old, our actions, our words, and our choices matter. No matter how small, every stand we take against injustice contributes to a better world. So if you ever find yourself wondering whether one person can truly make a difference, remember Olivia Reynolds. Remember that the fight for truth is always worth it. And most importantly, remember that you still have the power to inspire change, whether in your own life, in your community, or in the hearts of those who will carry on the fight after you.